Speed and Guian's Deep Dives podcast is an official podcast made by Speed and Guian with the voice made from Google's Notebook LM. Do not reproduce our podcast without permissions from the owner. Welcome to the Speed and Guian's Deep Dive podcast. Today we're diving deep into a system that kind of quietly shapes how we consume content every single day. You know, from movies you stream to videos online. We're talking about the International Administrative Board of Age Classifications, or IABAC. And our source material for this, it comes straight from Speed and Guian's official website, specifically the sections on IABA, International Administrative Board of Age Classifications, and also time regulations. So our mission today is really to unpack what these classifications actually mean, to dig into the surprising nuances of their impact levels, and crucially, understand how they dictate not just what content gets approved, but when and where you can actually see it. It's way more complex than just a number. Okay, let's unpack this.
Indeed. And, content classification systems like this are absolutely vital. They're basically designed as a guide, right? Helping viewers and maybe especially parents navigate all the media out there, understand what they might be seeing. What's particularly fascinating about the IABE system, as our sources show, is just how detailed and specific it is. It goes way beyond just a simple age guideline. It brings in this idea of impact, which isn't just about if certain things are present, but how intense they are and the potential effect on different people watching.
That's a really critical distinction you're making there, the system as a guide versus like a hard barrier. And that gets even clearer when we see how different platforms handle these ratings, right? We all kind of know G, PG, but the IABA system takes even those familiar letters and adds, well, a surprising amount of nuance that changes how you think about suitability. So let's kick things off with what seems like the simplest category, unrestricted. You might think, okay, that just means for everyone, no worries. But the IABAC framework tells a slightly different story, doesn't it?
That's precisely it. The core idea of unrestricted, it means broadly viewable. But even here, there are these crucial distinctions about content impact and who it's really suitable for. It's easy to just assume unrestricted means, no thought required. But the IABSC's approach, even right down to G and PG, it forces you to consider that all content has some kind of impact. This isn't just about avoiding the obvious stuff. It's acknowledging the subtle ways even mild content can affect different ages, different developmental stages. It suggests a philosophy that watching stuff is never entirely neutral. And that's quite a shift from just slapping an age number on things.
That's a really powerful point. Okay, so starting right at the baseline, we have G general. Our source says explicitly suitable for all viewers. Sound like family viewing, right? Content is very mild impact. But here's that little caveat. Some scenes may scare very young children, and maybe more pointedly, the materials rated G are not necessarily intended for children. Wow. That's quite a distinction right there at the gentlest level. Sets the tone. Okay, moving up just a notch, we get PG, parental guidance recommended. Still described as suitable for general viewing, but it warns some scenes may be unsuitable for young children. Here, the content is just noted as mild impact. Then there's PG-13, parental guidance 13. Again, suitable for all viewers, but the warning gets more specific. Some scenes may be unsuitable for viewers under 13 years, and it clearly recommends guidance from a parent or guardian for persons under 13 years. And notice the impact level steps up again. Mild, moderate in impact. You can really see that gradual increase in the warnings, even inside this unrestricted zone. Right, and finally, within this unrestricted category, we hit M for mature. This one is recommended for viewing by mature audiences aged 15 years and over, but interestingly, it clarifies that children under the age of 15 can see M-rated materials, but it's not recommended. The content here, moderate in impact. And it's also worth noting something highlighted in our sources. There used to be an unlisted classification called 13 plus Mugu. It was suitable only for viewers 13 or above, came with a parents are strongly cautioned warning, but that's now been replaced as M rating. So the system itself changes over time.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is exactly that, how even these supposedly unrestricted ratings carry such specific warnings and nuances about suitability. It just highlights the IABAC's really precise approach to defining impact levels. It's not just, suitable, unsuitable, black and white. It's a spectrum. It acknowledges the subtle differences in content sensitivity, audience maturity, even before we get near the really restricted stuff. It's basically saying that even stuff that seems harmless can have a varied effect. And that's a level of detail many systems just, they gloss over it.
Absolutely. And speaking of restricted categories, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The impact levels jump quite a bit. If those unrestricted categories had nuance, well, prepare yourselves, because the restricted classifications aren't just a step up, they're like a fundamental shift in what's allowed and the controls around it. This is where the IABAC really shows its regulatory side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These ratings, they signify content that is strong in impact, or sometimes even high in impact,
Yeah.
which means inherently they need stricter controls. And as we'll see, some very specific conditions for access, for broadcast. The assumption here is that this content, just by its nature, poses a greater risk of adverse effects, especially on younger or maybe more sensitive viewers.
Okay, so starting with R16 plus S, restricted to persons 16 years and over, it's explicitly not suitable for viewers under 16 years unless being accompanied by a parent or adult guardian. Content, strong in impact. That accompanied by a parent bit for R16 plus S. That's interesting, isn't it? Does that mean the parent's presence somehow mitigates the strong impact, or is it more about legal cover? And does that idea even work well for streaming where a parent might not physically be right there?
That's an excellent question. Historically, yeah, that accompanied clause often did both things. It put the onus on the adult to judge, and legally, it implied some kind of oversight. In a cinema, it's easy a gatekeeper. But online, in the streaming world, much trickier. It really relies on things like parental lock systems, which are, let's be honest, only as good as their setup. It definitely highlights that tension between a maybe older classification style and how we actually watch things now, decentralized. Oh, and our source also mentions an AV16 Plus rating. It basically mirrored R16 Plus in its rules, but it's now been surrendered, which again shows these systems aren't set in stone. They evolve.
Okay. Now, R18 plus this, restricted to persons 18 years and over. This content may contain content that are not suitable for viewers under 18 years. And the implications here get very specific, especially for online platforms like YouTube. Our source highlights that if the video is rated R18 plus EUGD, we will set the video to age-restricted video on YouTube and strongly requires the use of the parental lock system. Impact level is strong, high in impact, and the source notes this may vary depending on the content severity. This is really where IABE starts hitting platform rules, right?
Exactly. R18 Plus, and as we'll see, R21 plus 8, they introduce this really fascinating friction point. IABC gives its rating.
Yeah.
But then platforms like YouTube layer on their own rules, their community guidelines, which are often quite stringent, sometimes even exclusionary. So something might get an IABC rating, but it still has to pass the second, maybe tougher filter.
Yeah.
For instance, the source is super specific for R18 Plus on YouTube. It says may only be classified and uploaded to YouTube when it contains high amount of violence and offensive language. Quote, and this is critical, it states. The video contains some sexual scenes, which may include drug or substance use, may not be classified and uploaded to YouTube. Quote, that tells us pretty clearly that for YouTube, certain kinds of explicit sexual content, even if IABC rated at R18 plus clubs, are just off the table.
Wow, that's a huge distinction. So IABC might say, okay, this is R18 plus Y, but YouTube's own rules can effectively veto that, meaning certain types of adult content just can't live on their platform, regardless of the IABC rating. Makes you wonder who really calls the shots on content access in the digital age, doesn't it? The source gives examples of R18 plus movies. Oppenheimer, though, that was actually withdrawn and re-rated R16 plus, interestingly, and The Wolf of Wall Street. Okay, and finally, the highest restriction level, R21 plus basis, is adults only. For viewers aged 21 years and over only, youth not allowed. This category covers explicit sex scenes, including full graphic nudity, which may include sexual violence, except language, and graphic drug substance abuse or use, including very extreme depictions of violence that are not permitted for children, young viewers, and viewers under the age of 21. Parental lock is required, is stated clearly for these. This sounds like a real minefield for anyone creating content.
It absolutely is. And again, those even stricter YouTube limits kick in. The source details that at some point, R21 plus rated videos will be uploaded to YouTube with a limited time at 11 p.m., specifically 5-10 days. After this time, it will be set to private mode or possibly deleted. And another huge exclusion. Explicit sex scenes, including full graphic nudity, are excluded due to YouTube community guidelines issues.
Gotta make it.
The content here is definitively high in impact. This really raises that question about how incredibly complex and specific these restrictions get, especially with explicit content hitting platform guidelines. The role of parental controls becomes less a recommendation and more a strong requirement. It highlights all these different layers of protection, or maybe limitations, that creators have to deal with. It's like a system of constant checks and balances.
Wow. And that 5 to 10 day window on YouTube for R21 plus stuff that's incredibly short. What does that even mean for the lifespan or discoverability of that content, especially if it's meant for adults only viewing? It almost sounds like a blink and you'll miss it kind of deal.
Precisely. It basically turns that content into a temporary exhibition, doesn't it?
Mm.
This really short window for R21 plus content on a massive platform like YouTube fundamentally changes how accessible it is, how discoverable it is. It implies this real struggle, I think, between creators wanting to distribute certain material, the classification board saying how impactful it is, and then the platform's own wider community standards. It's like a digital compromise that definitely leans heavily towards caution over just letting it be widely available.
Absolutely. Okay, so beyond just the ratings themselves, the IABA also has these time regulations. So what does this all mean for when the content can actually be viewed? It's not just what you can watch, but when, which adds another fascinating layer here.
These time regulations, they feel like a fascinating relic of traditional TV broadcasting, don't they? They imply this fixed schedule, this belief that you can control when certain groups are watching. Like the family gathered around the TV in the evening. That system was built for that world where broadcasters held all the cards for content flow. But today, in our streaming world, where basically every minute is prime time for someone, how does this rigid schedule even work? It really raises a huge question of how relevant these rules are in an on-demand universe.
That's a really strong point about that clash between old media rules and new media reality. Our sources lay out these specific times pretty clearly, though. G and PG-rated content, suitable for transmission at any time, though it does note sometimes 6 p.m. For PG-13 content, it's suitable for transmission at 7 p.m. And for M-rated content, you're looking at suitable for transmission at 8 p.m. You can see that clear progression, right, lining up with those traditional watershed or family viewing hours. Then, moving into the restricted zone, R16 plus content is deemed suitable for transmission at 9 p.m. R18 plus gets pushed even later, suitable for transmission at 10 p.m. And then, for R21 plus air, it's only suitable for transmission at 11 p.m. And even then, like we heard, there's that incredibly limited window from 5 to 10 days, after which our source confirms it'll be set to private mode or possibly deleted on YouTube. That really highlights just how temporary access can be for the most explicit stuff, really controlling not just who sees it, but the tiny window they have. But what if content doesn't even get a rating? What happens then? The IABAC has this additional classification called RC Refused Classification. This apparently happens when some of the videos or movies did not pass the censorship. And it specifically mentions if it violates the Freddy's Playtime Guidelines. Now, for listeners, Freddy's Playtime Guidelines seems to be a specific internal set of content rules within the Speed Ingwayan ecosystem, acting like an initial filter before something even gets considered for an IABAC rating.
Yeah, and if we connect that to the bigger picture, refused classification, or RC, it's basically the ultimate stop sign. It implies that content has crossed some fundamental line. It's deemed totally unsuitable for release, even with the tightest age gates or time slots. The mention of Freddy's Playtime Guidelines is interesting. It serves as a concrete example of those underlying rules or principles that define what's acceptable or not, even before IABC formally looks at it. And the consequences are pretty severe, according to the source. The videos with the following violation acts will be banned worldwide on our YouTube channel. Quote, but the movies with the following violation acts will be banned in some countries. That's an interesting split, global bans for videos, country-specific for movies.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into the IABAC system, using the info from Speed and Gwynn's official website, it's really shown us just how incredibly granular and detailed content suitability can get. From the very mild impact of G, all the way up to R21 plus with its really strict time limits and platform rules, and then that final refused classification. It's a remarkably precise framework, designed to both guide and, well, control.
It truly does highlight the immense effort that goes into classifying content with this kind of precision. The goal seems pretty clear: protect viewers, especially younger ones, while still somehow allowing a broad range of material to get out there, but within this very defined system of controls. It demonstrates a really profound commitment to defining and managing what people see and how in a highly structured way.
So considering these incredibly detailed time regulations, that 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. stuff, and those very specific YouTube rules for high-impact content, here's something to think about. How do these types of rigid, almost time slot-dependent classification systems really adapt, or can they adapt, to an increasingly on-demand, global, algorithm-driven digital world where, traditional broadcast times are becoming less and less relevant? What does it actually mean for creators and for you as a viewer when suitability depends not just on age, but maybe on the specific platform you're using and the exact timing or even the fleeting window of when you consume it? See you again next episode of this podcast.